Thank you.
Okay, we are going to get started with our next session. We are still waiting. Well, actually, we're not going to wait, but we are still missing one of our panelists.
Well, actually, another one. Glad you also.
No, that's okay. One of our panelists, Asad Dandia, is dealing with the universal New York experience of train delays. The one train went from 96 to 137 without telling anyone, and there you go. But Asad is on his way, and we'll get started without him.
Just another day in New York.
Right, just another day in New York. All right, so as you all know, I've already said, I'm Henry Goldschmidt, the Director of Programs at the Interfaith Center of New York, and I will introduce our fantastic panelists in just a moment. But just a word or two first to kind of frame the conversation. One of the most important goals of today's conference, and of ICNY's work as a whole, is to bring the wisdom and experience of New York's faith communities to bear on social issues facing the city. Our panelists in this session will reflect together on theologies of power and resistance, drawing in part on their diverse faith traditions. I hope their conversation enriches your understanding of the challenges we face under the Trump administration, as well as the powerful resources we have at our disposal, very much including all of our diverse faith traditions, resources to defend democracy from authoritarianism. That said, I want to be clear before we start that no one person, not even our extraordinary panelists, can speak on behalf of an internally diverse religious community.
Oh, I speak on behalf of all Jews. Disagree. I'm in charge.
Rabbi Sharon, if only that were the case, right? Inshallah, but not so much. Over the next hour or so, we'll hear Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, and Vodou perspectives on authoritarianism, but we won't hear the Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, or Vodou perspective on anything. Sorry, Sharon. That's just not how faith traditions work. Now, with no further ado, let me introduce our panelists. I'm going to introduce them very briefly, and remember you can read more about their work in the speakers' bios linked to another one of the QR codes in your program. So,
Just look at the one that's...
all right, so we'll be joined in a moment. I'm going to introduce him in absentia. We'll be joined in a moment by Asad Dandia, who is a public educator, Muslim community leader, and the founder and director of New York Narratives. And then I'm delighted to be joined by Sukhman Singh Dhami, who is a human rights attorney, a Sikh community leader, and the co-founder and director of the organization Ensaaf, and by Queen Mother Dr. Dòwòti Désir, a high priest in Haitian Vodou, ambassador of the High Council of Kings of Bénin, and the founder and director of the Imperial Corps Agoodjié. Did I pronounce that at all right?
Agoodjié.
Okay, Imperial Corps Agoodjié, my apologies, of the African diaspora. And finally, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, who speaks for all Jews, and is the... Look, as a Jew, I would vote for her to speak for all Jews, but in real life, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum is the founder and director of The Beacon, senior rabbi emerita of Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, and I'm delighted to say a member of the board of the Interfaith Center of New York. Okay, now panelists, and again, Asad will join us, I think, in just a moment. He's like in an Uber as we speak. But panelists, I'd like to start by asking you each to reflect theologically on authoritarianism from your own understanding of your faith tradition. Perhaps you can introduce yourselves briefly first, and then share some of your tradition's ethical teachings about the use and abuse of political power. How does your tradition view the just and appropriate role of government? What distinguishes just from unjust forms of power? And perhaps most important, how does your tradition understand the role of a community in resisting unjust power? How, in other words, does your faith speak to our troubling political moment? And I have no preference of what order to go in. I guess if you guys don't have a preference, we can just start with Sukhman.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in community with you, and especially to engage in this discussion and conversation, which couldn't be more timely and more urgent. I'm the co-founder of an organization called Ensaaf, which means justice in the Punjabi language and many South Asian languages. And the focus of my work has been for 2 decades to investigate and document atrocity crimes committed by India's security forces and build evidence to hold the perpetrators accountable. And as you can imagine, the context of this work very much is rooted in resisting authoritarianism, both systematic impunity as well as a culture of impunity, which allows these types of atrocities to unfold over and over again within India and South Asia. The faith that I identify with and practice, the Sikh faith, you could say, is by design and structure anti-authoritarianism. It was advented in medieval India by Guru Nanak, and from the outset, this is an individual with a deep sense of compassion and justice, condemned the caste system, spoke about the common light that pervades all of humanity, establishing the principle of fundamental equality among all genders and among all people. He established a tradition in which all the successive prophets again and again reinforced the principles of justice, compassion, equality, and how corrosive practices like the caste system and even religious hierarchy, whether that's reflected through religious institutions or cultural practices, is pernicious to the foundations of society. At the time of the founding of the Sikh faith, Guru Nanak witnessed a brutal invasion. And this is recorded in our scripture, where he condemns and laments this invasion and says that when one power confronts an equal power and there is conflict, you can say that there is fairness or justice there. However, when one individual invading force comes in as a tyrant and lays waste to an entire population and country, that can never be considered just. And this has been the ethos, both through scripture and through practice throughout Sikh tradition, that has been reaffirmed again and again. You may notice in terms of my appearance, I'm wearing a turban. So this has deep spiritual meaning, but it also has a political significance, and is to assert the sovereignty of every individual and human. Even to this day, people wear crowns and caps as a form of authority. And so what the Sikh faith wanted to establish is to decentralize authority, to say everyone has, by divine construct, an individual sovereignty. So we neither seek to be ruled nor rule. And with that, I would say that my understanding of all faiths really is these are radical movements of love. And fundamentally, power and love cannot coexist. And so in that sense, Sikhism at its core is an anti-authoritarian faith, tradition, and movement. And it really is a revolutionary love movement in that sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Sukhman. I really love, just to flag one, your interpretation of the turban really jumps out at me as just an example of the small things. I mean, not that committing to wear a turban all the time is a small thing, but the things that we can all do on a very individual basis to regardless of your people of all faiths or none, choices that you can make every day to signal your resistance to authoritarianism. So thank you. Queen Mother Dòwòti.
Well, thank you. In the Haitian tradition, when we speak, or before we speak, and to greet each other, we exchange the words honor and respect. So when I say honor, please say respect. Honor, respect. Honor, respect. Honor, respect. Power deep, power fair. What has been said, may the deed be done.
Good.
I'm a consecrated head in Vodou, and I am a member of its clergy in Manbo Asogwe for almost 30 years. But I also hold chieftaincy titles in the secret societies of the Zangbeto and the Igungun societies of Benin Republic. And as a queen mother, welcome to our panelists. As a queen mother, I'm part of the traditional governing system of Benin Republic, particularly in the African diaspora. And that means a portion of my work is, of course, spiritual, but it's spirituality as it relates to public policy and cultural diplomacy. I founded the Imperial Corps Agoodjié of the African Diaspora, which is an educational and leadership program for women of African descent and their allies. I've been in the service of Vodou since about 1995, and the work that I do is a little bit different. I don't do a lot of ceremonial work. But I'm interested, and I do work that focuses on healing social ruptures and trying to mainstream the presence, if you will, of Vodou in a variety of institutions. So I show up in places that other people don't, and do things that we haven't done before, like gathering Vodou priests to go to City Hall, secure licenses so that they might marry people legally. I have showed up and organized events at the United Nations as a Vodou priest, using my title so that issues that concern racism, xenophobia, and discrimination and other forms of intolerance, our voices are seen, they are heard. So I'm a little bit like the rabbi here. I end up speaking on behalf of all Vodouis. And the truth is sometimes we have to do that. But sometimes we have to do that because our communities have become apolitical. Our communities have sequestered themselves. Our communities are so repressed, so oppressed, so fatigued in some ways by authoritarianism that we just don't show up in places anymore. But it's also in our case, in some ways, we've been the subject of religious violence and authoritarianism since 1501. So, the world has been upside down for so long. I'm not saying that this is normal, but we're just used to this. And, but as a response to this kind of social repression, authoritarianism, etc., Vodou, which many people think of as a religious practice, and it is. It's a theology of liberation. But I often think of Vodou in terms of a comprehensive system of knowledges that consists of any number of sciences that range from astrology to agronomy to psychology to martial and military sciences. And it has its esoteric as well as its exoteric sides, but these things are also framed by call and response. Call, honor, response, respect. So I have to explain this to you because part of the religious and authoritarian violence that we've been subjected to is I have to work towards stopping people from thinking that, oh yeah, she's part of that devil-worshipping, chicken-killing, zombie-making cult of people. That's not who we are. We've never been that. In fact, the foundation of Vodou is not unlike Sikhism. It is about love. It is about balance and equilibrium. It is about honoring and respecting not only ourselves and each other in our communities, but the environments that we live in. So we honor and respect the earth, the air, the fire, the water. And we learn from these elements so that we are able to counter the chaos that has been part of the discourse of domination that we have been under for centuries. And so, as Vodouism, the words Vodou means to seek and work reverently and fervently for peace, but not to do so in a docile way. We search for peace. We search for equilibrium, for balance, for egalitarianism in a manner that is a counter to the chaos that has been colonialism, that has been enslavement, that is now mass incarceration, that is capitalism, that is deportation. So there has always been this element of resistance in our traditions that we've been instilled with, and we have created within our own tradition a kind of a countermeasure, a counter structure. There is the cool, easygoing side of Vodou, and then there's the other side of Vodou, which is, in the Caribbean, anybody who's from the Caribbean, there's something that we're always taught, sort of grab certain people by the waist of their pants, and so you're sort of like this, helpless. So there is this idea of sort of grabbing the thing that is trying to oppress you, of the words tonek lazem, which is to call down the thunder, so that whoever it is, whatever it is that is confronting you, you fight back. You fight back. This, the Newtonian physics, if you will, or the law of mass conservation. Everything in energy is neither created or destroyed, and everything in the universe has its equal and opposite reaction. So what exists above exists below, and so we understand that mirroring, and the loi, the spiritual forces that we have, manifest as the specifically, I'll focus on the Ibeji or the Mavasel, the twins, male, female, hot, cold, up, down, dark, light. We have binaries. Some of you may not like that, but we have binaries in our systems. But those lois teach us to counter what is wicked, what is evil, with what is good, with what is love, and what is going to create a state of equilibrium for all of us to live in and thrive in.
Thank you.
I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you both?
So I want to start by saying that it's a joke what I said before, but why does the right wing feel so comfortable saying they speak on behalf of all of our traditions? And those of us who are not on the right wing, we qualify, we condition, and I say this about all of our traditions. So the first thing we have to do is claim our mantle as much as the right wing does and say, we also are speaking on behalf of God and morality, and not be uncomfortable with it. Now, they're going to not exactly say that I speak on their behalf, but okay, let them say that, right? I'm now going to talk about what I see Judaism to be, and I want to encourage us all to see us having that power, that God-given power, and to not assume that the right wing is the authentic forms of our traditions, and somehow we are we're the outsiders. And that brings me to a place of understanding that I believe so deeply in what's happening here today, what's happening under the direction and leadership of Reverend Chloe Breyer, and today with Henry's beautiful organizing and the whole staff and all of the peoples who are here today. I'm also on the board of New York Jewish Agenda, and I know Nancy Kaufman, our board chair, is here. all of us who are here today trying to understand what it means to talk about religious resistance to authoritarianism understand that we have deep and powerful agency in a world full of evil. And that is not only depending on what's empirically visible. And that power of understanding, just because there are certain people in positions of power, our traditions give us, I think, a lot of, if we are willing to tap into it, understanding that in the end, Pharaoh does not win. We know the end of the story. We don't know how long it will take. But that understanding that in the end, Pharaoh does not win. And the people who have to resist for hundreds of years, starting with that story, which has become so foundational for my people and for others, understands that we have to look at a long horizon and have the energy and ability to understand we're building for a future, even if we don't personally live to see it. Now, of course, I hope we do, right? That doesn't, but the ability to say whether or not we're successful is not dependent on whether or not we personally experience the liberation of the world. The Israelites were enslaved for 400 years. What if during year 225, all of the people then decided to just give up and kill themselves and say there is no future? As a Jew, I wouldn't be here today. If you're here as a Christian, you wouldn't be here today. Some Muslims wouldn't be here today, depending on the ancestry. So somebody who was an enslaved Israelite in the year 225 of those years didn't give up. So who am I to give up? That's the first place I would start. We have to respect our ancestors and all of our traditions who had difficult moments in their journeys, and their journeys made it possible for us to be here. So that's the first place I start. The second place is I like to quote Rabbi Joachim Pritz, who was a rabbi in Newark, New Jersey in the 30s and then the 40s and into the 50s and early 60s. He was a young rabbi in Berlin in the 1930s and understood he had to get out pretty quickly because of the rise of Nazi authoritarianism, fascism, etc. And he moved to Newark, New Jersey, and was the rabbi of a very large, significant synagogue there. And he often said that as a result of coming from Berlin, he understood what his role was and that he could not abide the oppression of African Americans in America, given what his history was. I always say he gave the most famous Jewish rabbinic sermon ever given that nobody knows. He was the rabbi that spoke at the 1963 March on Washington, and he had the unfortunate position on the program of speaking right before Dr. King. So nobody remembers that he spoke, and nobody remembers what he said, but it was very powerful. He said very briefly, described himself as being a rabbi from Berlin, and he said, first of all, as a Jew, I rely both on theology and history to tell me where the place is I should stand. God demands of me to stand here today and with those who are fighting for full equality here in the United States, he said at that time. So the first is theology. We understand God demands of us where we stand, what role we play. And second is history. We know as people who have been victims of oppression that it's our job to make sure nobody else is. And he said that famous line about silence, and that what he learned from Nazi Germany was not that some people do evil in the world, but the vast majority remain silent in its presence. There always is evil. The question is, what are those around saying? So Joachim Prince, want to give him credit because he's so unknown because of that sad spot on the program. And I think that concept for us as Jews is important, that we rely both on theology, we believe God demands it of us, and we believe in the history, what history has taught us. The Bible says more times than any other time, remember you are a stranger. 36 times it says that in the Jewish Bible. Therefore, how do you act in the world is important. Bimkom she'eno anashim, in a place where there is no humanity, the Mishnah tells us, that's exactly the moment where our job is to be the most human, to be the most humane, to claim our humanity because of that very, very simple verse in the very beginning of the Bible that says that we are created, each of us is created in the image of God. If we are to believe that, then how we treat other human beings has to matter. And of course, this comes to our place right now, and I know that my time is up, so Henry's very generous. So I'll say more in our next round. But I just want to say, this is where I understand why it's so powerful for us to be here today. Our job is to be in coalition, in community, not always with people we 100% agree with. As Ruth Ben-Ghiat said, we have to create a resistance movement that's broad and deep and doesn't apply constant purity tests to whether or not somebody can join. We have to model what it is to be sometimes in disagreement, but understanding what our long-term goals are. And that will, I believe, answer some of the questions she raised this morning. How do we replace the systems that got us to this place to begin with? And part of it is learning how to deeply, deeply create coalitions of love and of caring that understands that anybody who hates Assad from Islamophobia hates me as a Jew from anti-Semitism. And that is so deeply, deeply linked that we have to keep resisting those who hate. So I'll stop there because I have Henry's energy coming up. So thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Sharon. Assad, thank you, and I'm so glad you survived train delays and rerouting of the one, and I'm glad you could join us.
So I apologize for my delay. I'm coming from my parents' apartment, which is based in a faraway land called Brighton Beach. So lengthy commute. I might as well have been coming from Connecticut, but we're here. And Henry, if I may ask you to repeat the question that you had asked,
Sure.
so that I can have something to work with.
So the abridged version, I suppose, is asking you to reflect theologically on authoritarianism. Share some of your tradition's ethical teachings about the use and abuse of political power, what distinguishes just from unjust forms of power, and how does your tradition understand the role of a community in resisting unjust power? Basically, Islamic political science in about 3 or 4 minutes.
All right, here we go. So, big asterisk, this is a subject and a topic that can have its own 15-week graduate seminar. I just want to thank my colleagues and my fellow panelists here for a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful event, and it's really hard act to follow up on. The last time I was on a panel with Rabbi Kleinbaum, I don't know if you remember, this was 8 years ago in March of 2017, so this was just 2 months after Trump round one, and it was the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. I had just, at NYU, and I had just graduated undergrad the year before, so I graduated college in 2016. I'm aging myself here, and we were organizing for Syrian refugees on campus, many of whom were applying to be students, and we had 3 people on that panel. It was myself, Rabbi Kleinbaum, and a Palestinian Lutheran pastor from Bay Ridge named Khader al-Yatim. Some of you might remember him or be familiar with him. He, at the time, was running for city council in Bay Ridge. This was the first time the Arab American community and even many Muslim Americans felt that we're being seen in the American political tapestry. He did not win that race or that election, but his campaign manager was a friend of mine and a young South Asian man by the name of Zoran Mamdani, who will now be our first Muslim mayor, first Shia Muslim mayor. Just a year ago, there was a lot of talk about Muslim communities, Asian communities, Latino communities, communities of color, not feeling welcome on the table at the Democratic Party. And I don't know the extent to which I can get into politics, but I will say this. No endorsements. You know who my friend is already, so yeah. He's gonna be our next mayor. And in the last year and a half, I just feel that the momentum in New York, and I'm a New York nationalist, I'll put it out there, probably before I'm a Muslim, I'm a New York nationalist. The momentum in New York.
I thought we shared our Brooklyn nationalism.
Yeah, well,
Those other boroughs are okay, but...
Right, well, there are Manhattanites in this room. I see a New Jersey table. We gotta be respectful.
University here too.
So I'm feeling so hopeful, and so grateful to be here with you all, and I'm just gonna share a little bit about what inspires me from my tradition. Being from the Islamic tradition means that we're the youngest of the three Abrahamic faiths, which means we can draw from the best of the last two that came before us. So you heard the stories, right? You know the Hebrew Bible, you know the New Testament. We got all of that plus one. And the plus one happens to be the Quran, and there's a particular passage in the Quran that really resonates with me. Henry, you asked about governance and you know what it means to engage with power. And there's a verse or a passage in the Quran where God is talking to the angels, and this is before humanity exists. So humanity doesn't exist yet. And God is communicating with the angels. And in Islamic theology, our conception of angels is that angels do not possess free will. They are bound to worship and praise God, and don't have the will to do anything else. Whereas human beings have free will. We are born with the choice. We have the power to choose. And so God is having a dialogue with the angels, and God tells the angels, I'm going to create a creation, a being on the land, in the earth, and this being is going to be, the Arabic term is Khalifa, which translates as caliph. And the term kind of became a buzzword roughly from 10 years ago in the Middle East. But what the linguistic meaning of that word is steward or caretaker, someone who is responsible for somebody or something. And the angels hear this, and the angels ask God, are you going to create something that is going to cause chaos and destruction on the earth? So there's an assumption or a presumption that the angels had about us, humankind, saying that, God, are you sure you want to do this? Right? And the response...
A reasonable question.
Right, and well, here's God's response in the Holy Book. God says, I know that which you do not know. Meaning, I know my people, and I trust them. That is why I am creating them. So God entrusted us in the Quran. And God is telling the angels, hold your horses. I know what I'm doing. I trust my people, and I know they are going to serve me, right? And so humankind is created, and we are born with the choice to be better than the angels, because when you're given the choice between good and evil, and you choose good, you are, at least in the Islamic theological conception, better than somebody who has no choice in the matter, right? So each and every single one of us has the capacity to transcend the angels. So that is the metaphysical / ethical meaning of the word caliph. I have a good friend of mine named Harun Mogul. I'm sure he's spoken here a couple of times. He's a scholar on Islam. He studied at Columbia. He wrote a great book called 2 Billion Caliphs. If you thought one caliphate was bad, imagine 2 billion of us. 2 billion caliphs. And the idea is that each and every single one of us, whether you're a Muslim or not, is a caliph. You're a steward. You're a caretaker. You're a shepherd for your flock. So you have a responsibility. In Islamic governance, and there's a theory of a social contract, right? You are bound by what's known as a bay'ah, which means a pledge. I don't know what the Hebrew cognate of that might be, but it's a pledge or an agreement between two parties to say, you are responsible for X, Y, and Z, and I am responsible for X, Y, and Z. Islamic theology and Islamic ethics speaks the language of rights and responsibilities. So I have a right over you, and you have a right over me, and I have a responsibility towards you, and you have a responsibility towards me. If you are sick, your right is that I visit you when you are sick, right? If you are struggling, then your right is that I tend to your struggles, right? And I have a responsibility to come to you and ask you, are you sick? Are you well? How is your family? You know? And this applies to the governance level as well. When we're talking about rulership and governance in the context of responsibilities, the people that rule over you have a responsibility towards you, and you have a responsibility towards them. The first successor to the Prophet, peace be upon him, was a man named Abu Bakr, and in his speech right, in his inaugurational address, if you will, he said that, do not obey me if obedience to me is disobedience to God. Right? So if obeying me means disobeying God, meaning committing an injustice, then do not obey me. In today's contemporary American democratic context, right, where not everyone is a believer in God, but we are bound by a constitution. Right? This is our shared social contract. This is our linguistic and political register that we all reference back to, right? And if obedience to the orange man from Queens means disobedience to the Constitution, then we do not obey the orange man from Queens. No offense to Queens, right? We obey and follow the Constitution. And if he calls us to break with the Constitution, we say no, right? And this is how I understand Islamic theology in the modern day, in the contemporary moment. I'll just end with a couple of hadith or sayings of the Prophet. The Prophet is sitting with his companions, and he says something that kind of confuses them. He says, help your brother, whether your brother is oppressed or an oppressor. And his companions say, what do you mean? We understand to help our brother when he is oppressed, but what do you mean help him when he's an oppressor? And the response is by stopping him from oppressing others, right? Another prominent hadith that you will hear cited in many Friday sermons is, if you see an evil in front of you, change it with your hands. And if you don't have the ability to change it with your hands, then speak out against it with your tongue. And if you don't have the ability to speak out against it with your tongue, then at least think ill of it in your heart, because you don't want to lose the feeling of righteousness and justice. And last but not least, probably my favorite hadith, and it goes back to what Rabbi Kleinbaum was saying, that if the day of judgment dawns upon you and you are planting a seed, finish planting it. So even if the end of times is quite literally upon you and you see it on the horizon and you have a seedling in your hand, plant it. I'll end there.
Thank you, Asad. So, I have another kind of question for you guys, but I really don't want this to just be like a round robin of like Henry has a question and then we have 4 answers. So what I want to do first is just invite all of you guys. Is there anything that jumped out at you in each other's comments or reflections? Anything threads you want to pick up on, similarities or potentially differences among your faith traditions? Queen Mother Dòwòti.
Yeah, actually, what you said about angels, I found interesting in terms of angels lacking free will, but humans do. Because in Haitian Vodou, there's a phrase, I guess it would be a hadith in our prayers that says, Zange Basino. So the angel below the waters is me. But there's a wordplay that is there. Because the Zange were also warriors. The Zange were, they in fact led a war, against the Caliphites in Iran. But it was a war of liberation. And so there is this notion of, the angels exist and we are we are human, but we are also divine beings having a human experience. So the angels do have free will. And it is incumbent upon them to fight back, to protect each of us, because we're all angels. But Vodou militates in the interest of love. It militates in the interest of balance, of equilibrium, of life first and foremost. So I just thought it was an interesting contrast to our thinking.
And I love that phrase, we are all divine beings having a human experience. That to me, that resonates with the idea of all humanity being created in the image of God. Other threads that folks want to tease out from each other's reflections?
Well, the one thing that I would say that's so interesting to me, and obviously in the world in which we live, that I referred to in a joking manner, which is all of our traditions have tensions within our traditions, and that becomes our that's why I mean that those of us who are on this side of the line of seeing religion as an opportunity for resistance to authoritarianism, to creating a different future, to forging a new understanding of what God wants with us. We also have people in our own traditions with whom we are, engaged in deep disagreements, sometimes violent disagreement, about what God wants of us. And we have to be aware that we're all doing that in different ways in our own traditions. Trying to establish that is very hard. And another reason why coalitions are so important across religious lines, but those of us who see that very differently. Because that side, the right wing of all of our traditions, they're in profound coalition with each other. I mean, they know how to do that work together, and they're doing it together. Whether it's white Christian nationalists or the nationalist Hindus in India right now, or Jewish supremacists or Muslim extremists, they're all working together in some deep ways, and we have to do at least as good a job of insisting that we have a coalition that's very profound and powerful in envisioning the future together.
We did.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, Rabbi Sharon, I really appreciate your, pushing back before. As a religious diversity educator, I will insist on the no one person speaks for a faith community, like acknowledge the diversity within every tradition, yada, yada, yada. But as a faith leader, I could not agree with you more. Like, it is essential for people in this room to own their voices as people of faith with no hesitation or qualification, right? For myself as an educator, I'll be the one to qualify and say, well, you don't speak for all, whoever, whatever group. But for everyone in this room, right, like, own your power, own your voice, own the power that is not empirically visible, that we all wield. So thank you for that, Sharon. So I do have one more question. Like the rabbi that you mentioned, Sharon, speaking at the March in Washington, we want to touch today both on theology and history. So I want to shift the conversation from theology to history, from ethical principles to practical strategy. Let me ask each of you to share one or two examples, and maybe just one example, because we're short on time and I want to give everyone in the room an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So maybe share one example of resistance to unjust forms of power from your faith community's historical experience, whether ancient or modern, or from your own community work for that matter. What lessons can we learn from this history that might guide our efforts to defend democracy? Sukhman, let's go right back down again, and then we'll also, but very briefly, and then we'll have a little more time for conversation among us, and then we'll throw it open to questions.
Thank you for that question. I apologize in advance, but I'm going to potentially violate what you asked me to respect. No disrespect intended, because there's two historical examples that I think are important to highlight, given the anniversaries that they represent. So this year marks the 350th anniversary of the martyrdom of Guru Tegh Bahadur, who was the 9th prophet in the Sikh Guru lineage. And this year also marks the 30th anniversary of the martyrdom of human rights defender Jaswant Singh Kalra. And so there's a clear connection in this kind of arc of history. And what makes Guru Tegh Bahadur's martyrdom so significant and in many ways unparalleled, in human history, is that this individual was martyred and sacrificed for the fundamental human rights issue relating to freedom of conscience and freedom to live and worship and practice how one wants. But what makes it so significant is that he was martyred not for practicing the Sikh faith, but because he was defending the freedom of worship of another faith. And so in that sense, it's a very, very significant foundational principle established within the Sikh tradition that we defend the freedom of conscience and the way of life of all humans. Fast forward, I mentioned that this year marks the 30th anniversary of the human rights defender Jaswant Singh Kalra. This was an individual who investigated and exposed the Indian security forces, after enforcibly disappearing Sikhs, would then secretly cremate their bodies en masse. And so he, as he felt obligated that he had to kind of confront this injustice, and spoke very openly about his investigations and findings, despite being threatened repeatedly to kind of retract his findings. And in his last public speech, he said that the purpose of Sikhs is to defend the human rights of the world. And that is why the government is so threatened by the Sikh movement. And shortly thereafter, after publicly exposing this practice of enforced disappearances and mass cremations, he himself was brutally tortured and killed. And the reason why I wanted to share these historical examples is because I think all of our traditions, in Scripture, clearly articulate ethics. They clearly articulate fundamental human rights, values, and principles. They clearly articulate centering love. However, it's also important to remember how these were actuated and how these were practiced. And so these are two very clear examples from the Sikh movement, how these principles were lived and acted upon.
Thank you, Sukhman. And that's a wonderful way to put it, right? With the ideals are there and they're powerful and they're important, but how do people actually live them out? How does it happen? Yeah.
This is such a big question for me. In fact, even at my table, we're talking about a level of anxiety that we've had about participating in this event and discussing these issues. And I guess for myself, the depth of it goes back to 1685, and even though I wasn't alive then, my ancestors were. And so with the Code Noir that existed, the Code Noir, there are four things that it did in terms of embodying authoritarianism in the worst ways. It turned the enslavement of Africans into chattel slavery, so we were like furniture moving around, families being broken up, people sold off whenever and wherever. But there are three articles that I think specifically of. One that called for the immediate expulsion of Jewish peoples in the Americas. Two, that forced the conversion of Africans to Christianity, forced Africans to be baptized upon, not necessarily just upon birth, but at any point in their lives. Three, stopped drumming, because that was a point and a place of communication, but it was also a metaphysical tool for engagement. And so the Code Noir is one of numerous discourses of domination that still affect us and still impact us in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and globally in terms of the perception of not just Vodou, but other African-based traditions such as Beit, Lukumi, Santeria, Ifa, etc. So in response to the Code Noir, we created what I call the Code Noir. Not Code Noir, it's in French, but the Code Noir, which is the Black Code, as Blackness as a sacred frequency, Blackness as in our skin and our melanin. And that was evident in the Priya Jaw, the Priya Guinea, which fought back with memory. It cited names, it named individuals who effectively committed various crimes against us. It gave us a map that would allow us to return back home in many ways, metaphysically, but actually, if we wanted to return back to Africa, because this was a way of maintaining our integrity, maintaining ourselves in a space and a time where really there's no other word to describe what enslavement and chattel slavery was about other than cultural and physical genocide. So we established an entire system within our existing systems that would fight back, you know, pound for pound. It wasn't so much an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Basically, it was. We reconstructed another system that would counter every type of adversity that we faced in every single sector. Because at the end of the day, our interest is about establishing balance and peace for all of humanity. There can be no balance and peace if there's a bunch of us who have been tortured, slaughtered, maimed, killed, and another people who, you know, are still living their lives as if this was okay. It is not okay. And it's not okay not just for Africans to be oppressed. It's not okay for anyone to be oppressed. And the Haitian Revolution was about that, restoring that sense of balance and order and fighting back chaos. More recent examples, I think, would be in the case of the American occupation. That was a long time ago too, but in the 1930s, there were these rejetés programs. I think in the Jewish community we would refer to them as pogroms, where temples were destroyed, where priests were massacred. Actually, they were in the 1980s. Priests were being massacred. Actually, when I think about it, not too long ago, earlier this year, Vodou priests were being massacred from within our own communities. So this assault on our person continues to happen, and in some ways what it does is drive Vodou further underground, so its roots go further down, but at the same time, it becomes even more visible. Its leaves, its branches become even more visible. There are more and more organizations online. There are more and more organizations, formal and informal, that are working to counter the kind of repression that we've always had to deal with. And there are individuals such as myself, but many others who, again, make a point of showing up at forums such as this and giving our voices to our people, giving our voices to our communities and sharing our experiences so that you don't have to repeat and you don't have to go through what we went through. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have much to say in this category, and I'll be brief. We have a tradition in the Jewish tradition of looking at the original light that was created on the first day of creation, when it says "Vayihi or" and there shall be light, etc. But the sun and the moon had not been created yet. And of course, the sun is the source of the light that we on Earth know, and so there's a famous tradition that the light that existed before the sun was created was a special light. It was a hidden light. It was a primordial light that existed as something that then, after the creation of the sun, that primordial light was hidden away for us to discover when we needed it. It's called Or HaGanuz in Jewish tradition, the hidden light. And so I believe, going back in history to the beginnings of that biblical, that it's our job to release the light now. That God has that primordial light waiting for us to release. And so on January 20th of this year, we started a new program, a project, not an organization, a project called The Beacon, literally to unleash the light. The beacon refers to light. How do we, each of us, understand that we have the power, religious or secular, from all different multi-faith traditions, that we each have the power to release the light? And right now, the world in which we find ourselves needs a lot of light. And that light is deeply rooted in love. It's deeply rooted in our humanity and in our understanding of what our job on earth is. So we started a very simple project based on this idea of how do we all release the light. And I learned, actually, Asad will remember this, that after 2016, Trump #1, the Friday after that election in November, I woke up in the morning thinking to myself, as much as I fear Donald Trump as a lesbian, as a woman, as a Jew in America today, how does a Muslim American feel right now, given that his entire campaign was based on that original speech that was anti-Muslim? And I woke up that morning, gathered a couple of people from our synagogue, and we went down to the Interfaith Center, sorry, the Islamic Center of NYU, where a colleague and friend was the Imam, Khalid Latif, and we stood outside with signs. We couldn't change what had just happened. But our Jewish tradition teaches us that even when you can't change a policy, you still show up to show exactly what Asad you described. You disagree with it. You create that split screen. You show that, yes, something terrible is happening, but the people who are targeted need to know that not everybody agrees with it. That's one small, powerful step. We stood outside the building with signs that say Jewish New Yorkers love our Muslim neighbors. Very simple signs we made on the subway, and we could see as people approached us fear that we were there as protesters, that we were there to object to Muslims coming to pray on Fridays. And in fact, as they read the signs, people hugged us and kissed us, took selfies with us. So we had roses that we gave out to everybody. And then on January 20th of this year, I realized we need to be doing the same thing now, like on a broader scale. And we started this project called The Beacon. And I'm delighted there are a bunch of people here who participate. If you're on the leadership team or if you've participated in a Beacon event, please would you just stand? And I really want to introduce Emily Bernstein-Dunkel, who is our community organizer. And the idea is each of us, thank you can sit down. You may be sitting. The idea is, how do we come up with something that every person can do, not just heads of churches or synagogues or mosques, and not just ACLU lawyers and big organizations that can activate, but how can every human being participate in this resistance by releasing some of that light? So we started with a very simple project. Every Thursday, make a sign. Stand out in your neighborhoods, local, where your people who shop with you, who see you go to the school, people who live in your building. See a sign that says something about what you believe in. Yes, it's easy to condemn what's happening, and that needs to be there too. But it's even harder and more powerful to say what you stand for. What's the world you want when Pharaoh does not win? And this is so grassroots, and we're thrilled to have Emily on board, is now our community organizer. Anybody can talk to her. We have how to sign up. But this is the practical expression of something that's ancient in our people, which is every single person can do something. No one can do everything. Everyone can do something. What is the something that we are all doing? And we're providing this very small thing that people can do on their own in their own locations in order to release that primordial light that's waiting for all of us exactly at a moment of profound and terrifying darkness.
Thank you, Sharon.
I would just add, Rabbi Sharon, you had mentioned that the congregation CVST was so consistent in showing up to our Friday prayers that the only thing that stopped them was a global pandemic. Literally every Friday they'd be there, to the extent that there was a running joke in the community that the Jews pray the Friday prayer more and better than us as Muslims. It was really, really remarkable because these were people we did not know showing up to greet us every single week. Like literally every single week. And, the Islamic Center at NYU is a transient community, so you have students, working professionals coming in and out. Lots of refugees. Again, this was the height of the refugee crisis. These a lot of the congregations that were showing up there in our Muslim community at the time. You might have been the first Jews they had ever met in their lives, right? They had never met a Jew. They may have been coming from a part of the world that is in conflict with Jews. And so it's to see that Jews are showing up to their Friday prayers saying, you are welcome to the city, to this country, to this place, and we stand with you. And we will quite literally put our bodies in front of federal agents that are trying to abduct you and deport you, went a very long way. Henry asked me to share my own personal story here, just to kind of wrap it up. Once upon a time, very long time ago, when I was a college undergrad in community college, I had started a charity organization, a nonprofit, that was called Muslims Giving Back, NGB. And the basic premise behind the organization was that we, meaning my friends and I, we all came from low-income, working-class communities where there were lots of undocumented people. We grew up in a type of neighborhoods where English was spoken maybe as a third language, not even as a second language, but a third language. So people speak to you in two languages before they start speaking to you in English. And so folks didn't necessarily know how to navigate government bureaucracy, how to receive the help that they needed. And so my friends and I, we're all teenagers, 18, 19 years old. We decide every Friday we are going to put $10 into a proverbial hat, whatever money we get from our internships or our jobs here and there. And we're going to go to the grocery store and buy rice and beans and feminine products and eggs and whatever else that families might need, diapers, so on and so forth, and deliver them to people that we knew in the neighborhood, mutual aid before the term became vogue. And we kept doing this consistently every single week. The year is 2012, going into 2013, so timeline-wise, we're looking at Occupy Wall Street, picking up the Black Lives Matter movement. The hashtag was born that year, 2013, and in the Middle East, you had the Arab Spring. So my friends and I we're excited young teenagers, our political consciousness is being activated, and I'd get requests from all over the city, from young people like myself, mostly Muslims, who wanted to volunteer with the work that we were doing. And as I had mentioned to you, I live with my family in Brighton Beach. So if you wanted to volunteer, hop on that B train, come on down. And so I would invite volunteers all the way down to the local mosque there, and we'd make the Friday prayer, and then we're off to the Costco, we're off to the Whole Foods, wherever. Well, not Whole Foods, that might have been too pricey for us as teenagers. But we'd go to the grocery stores, the ethnic shops, and buy what we knew people needed. One young man that year, in March of 2012, sends me a message on Facebook wanting to get involved with my work, going through a mental health crisis, got kicked out of school. And I said, why don't you come on down? And he came on down. And he got involved with all of the activities that we were doing. And he was one of maybe 24 others. We kept doing this until about a month and a half later, someone from my neighborhood, we'll call him Mo. Mo asks me if I'm going to be present for the evening prayer because he has to tell me something. And if I'm not, he requests that I be there. So I said, all right, I'll see you at the evening prayers at the mosque. And after the prayer, Mo says, come to my car, I have to talk to you about something confidential. So I walk up to his car, and he asks me if I have my phone on me. And I say, yeah. He says, can I see it for a second? And I give him my phone. He takes his phone. He wraps them both in a cloth, opens up his car trunk, tosses the trunk, and he says, I need to speak to you without these present. Mo was an older brother figure to me, so he's someone I knew and I trusted. He was also a police officer. He was not on duty at the time. And so I get in the car and we're chit-chatting and catching up on things, and at some point he stops the car and he says, how's the organization going? You're delivering charity and so on and so forth. I said, yeah, we have a client base of like 15 to 20 families, we're in all 5 boroughs, so on and so forth. And then he pauses and he says, okay, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. You're being watched.
So,
I said, what are you talking about? He says, Asad, I just came back from the police precinct. There's a file with your name and your photos in it. The NYPD is trailing you as we speak. I can only do so much to protect you from the inside, but you have to take care of yourself. I don't know why they're doing it, but you're a suspect. I said, a suspect of what? He says, I don't know. Just take care of yourself. He sends me off home. I had a panic attack. You're a teenager, and you've just been told the world's largest and most powerful police department is surveilling you. Now, who do you tell? Are you going to call the cops? I'm not going to tell my parents. I'm a child of immigrants. You come home with a B on your report card, your mom gets a panic attack. I'm not telling my mom that I'm being spied on by the cops. So I called my friends. And my friends are like, okay, we talked about it and we said, let's just keep doing our work because we're not doing anything wrong. About 2 weeks later, somebody else from the neighborhood, we'll call him Al, was younger than me. He was like 17, I was 19, 18 or 19. And he says he wants to meet me in his house because he has something to tell me. And he says, come to my basement. And the basement was under construction. It was like, if he's calling me to the basement, he has to tell me something really, really interesting or confidential. So I go to his basement, and he says, "Hey man, I know somebody that's training to be in the police force as a detective, and he says that they've seen photos of us doing our charity work." I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he says, "Well, it's worse than that. We've been identified as a code orange threat." I said, "What's a code orange threat?" So the NYPD had threat levels from lowest to highest, going from green to yellow to orange to red. So we were like one level below the worst threat level. And I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We have a big event planned for June, it was 2012. We invited a speaker and everything. He said, after that event, we're shutting down the organization because we're too scared now at this point. I've heard from 2 different sources who don't know each other that me and my organization are being surveilled.
And
Right.
Asad, I'm so sorry, but I have to ask you to sort of do the abridged
I'll do
version.
okay, so 2 more minutes, and I'll wrap it up. And so we continue doing our work. We have our event in June, huge success. We're on cloud 9. We decided we're not gonna shut down the organization. We keep doing our work. Fast forward, October 2012. I'm coming home from food delivery. I get a message telling me to check social media. Something big just happened. I check social media, and I see on social media a status confession from the young man that had messaged me all those months ago. I was an informant sent by the NYPD to investigate terrorism. I'm coming out to confess. And he confessed. It was a 2-paragraph long confession. And our whole community was shaken up. Everybody was rattled. The press put out some pieces on it. I get a phone call from some lawyers at CUNY Law School about a week later, and they tell me, meet us in our offices, and we go to meet them in their offices, and they tell me they want to, the reason why they called me is because they heard my story, and they're working on a lawsuit to sue the NYPD for spying on Muslim New Yorkers, and they want me to be a plaintiff. And I said, are you crazy? Sue the NYPD? And I said, take some time to think about it, come back. So I took 2 weeks, came back. I saw some people there in the next meeting that were from an organization called the American Civil Liberties Union. And they said, Asad, the ACLU is going to represent you. This is going to be a federal case. I said, okay, sign me up. So we signed up. In June of 2013, we launched our lawsuit against the NYPD. I gave a big speech in front of One Police Plaza. And abridged version, the lawsuit lasted about 4 years. So the entirety of my undergrad, so in the daytime I was taking biology classes, thinking about my crush and my homework and my internships. And in the evening I was on phone calls with attorneys from the ACLU strategizing against how to end this surveillance. We got a settlement deal. So we weren't suing for money. If we were suing for money, I would probably not be here right now. I'm totally honest with you, I might be in the Bahamas. But we did a noble thing. We sued for policy change. I can talk about that in the Q&A. And we eventually secured the settlement. Donald Trump became president. We dodged him by just a couple of months that we got the settlement deal before he was able to reverse any of the court orders. And that is the story of how I changed New York City policy before I got my first full-time job out of college.
Thank you, Asad. And I have to say, we're going to have almost no time for Q&A because I don't want to stand between you guys and lunch. But seriously, if like a 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old, like Muslim kid from Brighton Beach can find the strength in him to sue the frickin' NYPD, then we can all do something today, right? We can all find that scene and find that light that Rabbi Sharon was talking about. We've all got it, and we can all use it. So thank you for sharing that story. We have like technically 3 minutes until lunch. Maybe we'll take 10 minutes for some quick Q&A with our panel. And then I really don't want to stand between you guys and lunch. But we do have just a couple minutes for questions. I already see a hand up. Can I ask all of our questioners to please be extremely succinct, like a 1 or 2 sentence, straight to the point question to make as much time as possible. Oh, Bettina, just yell.
Heard the story. I want to clear up. I mean, there's a lot of graphic that even about the street. But also now it says surrender and body people. We get this unmentionable where he fit in and she
Beautiful question. So sister said she's a member of the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. This is a mosque in Harlem, the successor mosque to the mosque founded by Malcolm X. The Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, God have mercy on his soul, passed away just about 2 weeks ago. The question was, how involved was he, or what role did he have? Well, I stand on his shoulders. He's really the one who guided me and guided our community. And the day we filed that lawsuit, he stood right next to me. And I vividly remember I was speaking in front of Police Plaza. I had like 25 cameras in front of me, the press. And it was crazy. I've never done it. Like, the biggest speech I ever gave was like a class presentation. And now I have like 35 different media outlets calling me. They assigned me a press agent. They said, if the media calls you, tell them you have an agent. I felt like a celebrity for a little bit. But Imam Talib stood next to me, and I remember mid-speech, I almost broke down. I put my face down, and I took a deep breath, and Imam Talib rubbed his hand on my back to comfort me. He rubbed his hand on my back to comfort me, and gave me the strength and the courage to come back and to finish my speech. And he has been a guide for us and for our community for many, many decades. And I don't know if those shoes can be filled, but we are going to try.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
sister.
so glad to bring Imam Talib into the room with us today. He's also a longtime friend and colleague of the Interfaith Center of New York, a close personal friend of our founder, Reverend James Parks Morton, and just it's a huge loss for the city to mourning him just 2 weeks ago. But I also just want to flag really briefly, that was also a moment, not interfaith solidarity, all Muslims, but African American Muslims standing with Arab and South Asian Muslims. And there are complicated racial dynamics within Muslim communities, right, where African American Muslims, whatever, it's complicated. But there was real cross-community solidarity in Imam Talib supporting you and sort of coming together in a moment of need. And I just want to, again, it's a model for us all. One or two more super quick questions.
Hello, my name is Raza. I run a grassroots collective called Queer Muslims of New York, and I'm a student at Union. My question is, and anyone can take this because at least two of you spoke about stewardship and our relationship with non-human animals and plants, etc. I was wondering, for those of us who are not Native Americans as settlers on this land, what do you take from your faith to understand your role in this moment on stolen land?
Thank you.
Movement. Albert. Yeah.
I don't want to take up the stage again, so in case anyone else wants.
Well, or the concept of stewardship, or I think the underlying question is, we're all inheritors of a legacy of settler colonialism in the U.S. with the, exception of Native Americans who may be in the room. We all live in that legacy, and we like it or not. So how do we respectfully engage with those issues in this moment? Going once, going twice.
Thank you for that question. I think it's impossible naturally to reverse the past. However, I think remembrance is critical. Failure to remember and acknowledge genocide, colonialism, occupation is what leads to the replication of these practices and policies and attitudes that continue the degradation of environment and exploitation of humans. And so, thank you for leading us with that acknowledgement. And I think it's something that everyone ought to kind of center in their personal practices as well as in, public gatherings like this. And I think the way to honor the genocide that took place in this country is to speak against genocides and colonialisms that are unfolding as we sit here.
One last quick question. Ruth, are you up there with a question? Nope, just hanging out. One last quick question, ma'am, and then we're gonna have lunch and continue the conversation in other ways all day.
Hi. I was just wondering, this is probably a stupid question, but Vodou, is that when did that come about? And is it strictly African nature?
When did Vodou come about? One was the world created, one was the universe created. I mean, I'm not being facetious. It is one of the oldest traditions of the world. It is an eco-theology, so it's very much based on nature in and of itself. It came out of the official argument out of Benin Republic or Dahomey. It is African, but I think Vodou is just a name we chose to call it. But I think in many of us, in many ways, practice Vodou. Because it is a philosophy about honoring and respecting our ancestors, the needs of our communities, and honoring, respecting the world that we need to forge for ourselves in the future, so that we are living in harmony, we are living in peace, that we are living in love, and we're creating the things that we need to move forward with each other. It's just that the face of Vodou changed considerably in the Americas, in Haiti specifically, and we did in fact innovate two different types of Vodou or faces or facets of it because of the crime against humanity that is enslavement and colonialism. I can tell you more about that later, but my stomach's rumbling too.
And thank you. And I think that's a reminder that, all of our faith traditions, the historians will tell you, here's when and where it was founded, here's what it drew on, whatever, and all that historical narrative, that's important as well. But we are all drawing on ancient, timeless principles that give us, again, Rabbi Sharon, I'm coming back to that light, before the sun, right? We all tap into that. Of course, not just Jews, and you were certainly not suggesting that. All of our faith traditions tap into that. Secular folks tap into that as well.
The visions.
Totally. Yes, and we all have those resources at our disposal to draw on in all areas of our life, personal, political, whatever. But in this moment of authoritarian rule in the U.S., that's some of the sources of strength that we need to look to. So I just want to thank all four of you for bringing those sources into the room and with your insights and wisdom.
Right.